It is the worst school shooting in American history.
Shotgun and blow your damn head off. I'll rip off your head.
Students Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold would embark on a massacre that would make history.
The most terrifying experience of my life. It was just a constant sound of gunfire.
Hey, stop playing on the phone. Let's go.
My son Dylan and his friend Eric killed 12 students and a teacher.
Columbine High School shooting, 1999. In the year 1999 of April, in a small town called Littleton, Colorado, two students, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, would claim the lives of 12 students and one teacher and injure 24 others. It was a typical sunny day in Columbine High School, and 2,000 students had no idea that two of their schoolmates would endanger their lives.
Parents' worst nightmare, a student's worst nightmare, the deadliest campus shooting in U.S. history.
And by the end of it, the two assailants took their own lives before facing their consequences.
They did not expect to come out of that alive, die in the incident, either from police bullets or by their own hand.
The massacre that would forever mark the lives of the people in Littleton, Colorado was meticulously planned by their aggressors, and most certainly just one of the many crimes that the two have perpetrated.
Also a Columbine senior. At the DA's office, a computer check reveals that Eric Harris has a police record.
Harris and Klebold had already displayed signs of troubled behavior prior to the massacre. That being, Klebold struggled with feelings of isolation and depression, and Harris, on the other hand, was known for his anger issues and repeated accounts of being bullied. In 1997, Harris made a website, and he would write instructions on how to make explosives, and even worse were his fantasies of taking the lives of the people around him, most especially his classmate Brooks Brown. On August 7, 1997,
Eric and Dylan tried to purchase guns at a gun show in Denver. Eric and Dylan used the school's television production equipment to produce a disturbing home video.
When Brown's parents viewed the site, they immediately contacted Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, in which an investigator submitted to request a search warrant on Harris, but unfortunately, it didn't reach the judge. They were arrested in the following year for breaking into a van and stealing computer equipment, where they pleaded guilty. They were only sentenced to a juvenile diversion program and attended anger management programs and were released a few weeks later. The massacre. On the day of the massacre, Harris and Klebold piled on weaponry. They were equipped with homemade explosives, firearms, and knives, and they targeted those they considered their enemies or bullies.
I kind of thought it was like a thing of fireworks or something like that. Do anything at all. I didn't really think much of it.
And prior to this, they were already giving tons of hints through videos and writings posted on their website, some of which have now been destroyed to keep away from the public. The plan was to enter the school wearing trench coats to hide their identities and weapons. They would then detonate the explosives that they had planted throughout specific areas in the school to cause mass casualties. And if there were any survivors, they would also claim their lives using their weapons.
Eric and Dylan went to a makeshift firing range in the mountains just outside of Denver.
Harris and Klebold really meant to cause as much destruction as possible, but things took a dark turn when the explosives failed to detonate.
That they may have explosives and automatic weapons.
This resulted in a huge change of plans, so instead, they took the lives of specific and random individuals throughout the school. When law enforcement reached the area,
I'm a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun, and the school is in a panic, and I'm in the library.
It had already been too late. Because of the threat of the explosives going off at any time, the aggressors had all the time in the world to claim the lives of the individuals in the school.
We were taking the test, and then we heard what we thought were rocks being thrown against the window. And then we heard a bunch of screaming.
Someone's shooting a gun out here, and someone got shot, I think. Some girl's on the ground saying she's paralyzed, and I think she's her.
And by the end of it, their lives as well. An article by the Rocky Mountain News stated that Patty Nelson overheard them shout 1, 2, 3 in unison just before a loud boom. Up until today, the Columbine High School massacre has left a mark on American society.
My son Dylan and his friend Eric killed 12 students and a teacher.
And a profound impact on the victims' families, survivors, and the community. Some of the students have bravely spoken about their trauma and continuously raise awareness on the topic of school shootings.
It's the most terrifying experience of my life. It was just a constant sound of gunfire.
Shot 4 times
Sue
during...
Klebold, Dylan's mother, even shared her own story, still trying to understand what she could have done to prevent her son's violence. Virginia Tech shooting, 2007. On April 16, 2007, at Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University in Blacksburg, Virginia, was marked as the deadliest mass shooting in American history. It took the lives of 32 individuals, injuring 17 others and many more from jumping from the windows to save themselves. Seung-Hui Cho, the 23-year-old aggressor, took his life after committing the massacre. From his childhood and prior to the massacre, Cho already had a troubled history. At age 3, he began to show signs of extreme depression, autism, and selective mutism. His parents made him go to therapy, but when he turned 18 and was of legal age, he stopped. Throughout his life, Cho faced social isolation and experienced bullying, which caused him to feel even more alienated and bottled up his anger about the world. In 2005, he was accused of stalking 2 female students and was investigated for it. The judge declared him mentally ill and ordered for him to get treatment. But even then, Cho wasn't institutionalized, so this allowed him to purchase weapons. The attack was performed in 2 acts of violence, the first being in the West Ambler Johnston Hall, where he took the lives of 2 students. The second act was in Norris Hall, one of the bloodiest acts in American history. He took the lives of 30 individuals in a span of a few minutes. What makes this even intriguing is the time gap between the 2 acts, which was 2 hours. The first act of the violence happened at 7:15 a.m. He took the life of a student and a resident assistant who was attempting to aid the student. The student remained alive for a couple of hours, but not a single person from the school, law enforcement, hospital, or her family was notified.
Well, we just got a frantic call from my daughter saying he's chasing us with a gun.
At the nearby elementary school, many parents would be reunited with their traumatized kids.
It took 3 hours before law enforcement were alerted, but Cho was already on his way to commit the second hellish massacre.
My wounds healed. I still had, 3 bullets in my body.
First, he changed his blood-stained clothes, and he went on to delete his emails and destroy his mobile phone. Second, he went to the post office and mailed a package consisting of videos and writings of his own to NBC News.
You had 100 billion chances in ways to have avoided today, but you decided to spill my blood. You thought it was one pathetic boy's life you were extinguishing.
And lastly, he went to Norris Hall carrying heavy-duty chains, locks, a hammer, a knife, and 2 firearms. Before the second half of the shooting began, a faculty member alerted the school's administration, and the first call to 911 was received at 9:42 a.m. Cho had been clearing one room to another in a span of 10 minutes, claiming the lives of his schoolmates and professors. Matthew Laporte, a student who was a trained Air Force ROTC member, attempted to tackle Cho but was then shot 7 times in an attempt to save his schoolmates. Clay Violin, the only survivor who wasn't injured, pretended to be unconscious until the police arrived. As tragic as it was, and in the hindsight of the event, there could have been potential actions that were taken to prevent the second half of the massacre.
So many more people than just the people inside the building. I think all the parents.
Remember, there was more than 2 hours between the first and the second act of violence. Enhanced communication and evacuation protocols should have been considered, but we can only say this in hindsight. But hopefully, schools would take preventive measures more seriously. Up to this day, the Virginia Tech shooting remains to be one of the deadliest massacres in American history. It is believed that Cho was inspired by the acts of Harris and Klebold, who committed the Columbine High School shooting in 1999. Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting. The Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting took place on February 14, 2018 in Parkland, Florida. The perpetrator, Nicholas Cruz, was a former student who attacked his former school and took the lives of 17 individuals and injured many more. Although it wasn't as meticulously planned as the other sprees, it's considered to be one of the deadliest school shootings in American history. Just like the other shootings, the aggressor Nicholas Cruz had a troubled background and a history of various mental health concerns. He had an intense childhood. His mother gave him up for adoption, and his foster parents had lost their lives before the incident. Reporters claim that Cruz had a documented history of aggressive behavior, reported incidents of harming animals, and disciplinary actions. He was transferred to 6 different schools in 3 years because of his aggressive behavior. In 2016, Cruz posted a bloodied photo of his wrists on Snapchat and saying that he plans to buy a firearm. This led a school resource officer to suggest that he should undergo an involuntary psychiatric examination, but a mental institution denied this and believed that he was was at low risk of harming himself or others. This one single mischaracterization or evaluation of his mental and emotional capacity, or the lack of it, would be the worst thing that could possibly happen. On the day of the attack, Cruz arrived with his weapon and multiple loads. He set off his fire alarm first to draw students and teachers into the hallways. He then targeted the individuals in several classrooms and hallways, causing extreme destruction and panic throughout the school. It took 6 minutes for him to claim the lives of 17 individuals. Cruz attempted to blend in with the panicked students to get away with what he had done, but on the same day, he was caught by law enforcement. This spree has caused an outrage among people who had contrasting beliefs on firearm measures and school safety, with students at Parkland founding the Never Again MSD, where they had lobbied for measures that would protect students like them in schools. In the end, Cruz faced 17 counts of first-degree murder and pleaded guilty on all charges. He was sentenced for life in prison with no parole.
I care about you, alright? I care about you, dog.
In his confession video, Cruz was visited by his brother. His brother couldn't even process the situation, and you could just feel the guilt within him. That's all for today's video, and I will see you on the next one.